Good afternoon. How are you? Well, some days the news writes itself. And today, in terms of outrages, there are two incidents that happened that I think are worthy of our condemnation. For the lie is transparent, and the transparency that so many hosts speak about as if there was any question that rather than transparent, the administration is opaque entirely. And why? Because that's how a cover-up works. That's how lies work. And the bigger the lie they believe, the greater is the chance that they can get away with it. So you have this dissociated group of cutthroats lying to us when we can see they're lying to us. Now, temperature is about 38. So we're approaching the cold weather that we get at night now. And some of you I know are colder and others are warmer. So enjoy the weather, whatever it is. We had a big press conference today at the Department of Injustice. They claim they arrested with a warrant a man who was involved on January the 5th, the day before the insurrection, placing bombs somewhere or a bomb somewhere. They are so proud that over all these years they've persisted and they've gotten this guy who planted a bomb. Now, in the category of thought experiments that I talk about, let's look at the obvious facts that nobody can hide from us. This guy had a bomb, they say, that never went off, never endangered anyone, and no one seems to have investigated very much until this gang got there. And they're talking about, we're talking about the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney, the head of the FBI, and his deputy, all out there beating their chests for what great work they did. What a team, how they found this all out. Well, why didn't they indict him if they had the evidence? And I'll tell you why. If you indict someone, then you can't talk to him or her because the attachment of the protections of civil rights are enlivened, and you have a right to have a counsel, and they can't speak to you. So if they arrest him, they can badger the living daylights out of him. I have no idea how old he is. He's from Virginia. And get him to say what he was doing. Now, it's a wild guess on my part, but if he's placing this bomb the night before January the 6th, he's an adjunct to the insurrection calculated by Trump to have him wrongly overthrow an election that he lost, but would preserve him as the president, despite the fact that the public did not vote for him. Isn't that amazing? So that's part one of the thought experiment, if you will. So how do you overlook that 1,000 people were arrested involved in the insurrection? And how do you deal with the fact that we have this numbnut felon Trump who pardoned them all? And then they have the nerve, after this group sought to hang the vice president and otherwise kidnap the speaker. And so if they're doing those things, does that sound a little more important than the bomb that didn't go off? And usually, these guys did everything but slap hands in the air. I didn't see a video of it. I heard it until I couldn't stand it anymore. And so they are bragging about a guy who planted a bomb that directly or indirectly was involved with the insurrection and the attempted coup by Trump, resulting in 1,000 being convicted, some very serious ringleaders who wanted to hang the vice president, who wanted to kidnap the Speaker of the House, and they think this is a victory. And one of the reasons is they say, well, Biden didn't make that case. Now, people who followed me know that I think Garland sat on his hands and was inert as to any prosecution or investigation of the real ringleaders. And that was a real error, and historic error that will be described as such in the years ahead when the next 10 books come out about the subject. So we're supposed to think that this crowd of dummies believes we're as stupid as they are to tell a story that underscores the frailty of their intent to serve us by serving up a failed bomb over the entire insurrection. So we go after the bomber for the bomb that didn't explode, and we ignore the fact that while these people are high-fiving each other for this fairly worthless prosecution, that there are fewer agents in the department because they've been fired. There are fewer assistants in the department because they were fired. Or people have left this position because they have the character we imagined law enforcement officers should have and are expected to have and are expected to execute. Every one of these people who was at this press conference today will, within the next 5 years, have a legacy of shame and disgrace, as they should, for what they've done, including today. Now, this isn't the only... Okay, so I said there were like 2 things that happened on the Hill worth talking about. The second one is the shooting and killing of perhaps 2 fishermen. Now, this is thought experiment number 2. They bombed this fishing boat. They want to call it a drug boat. Okay, this is something the U.S. Coast Guard does. Stops people, inspects, seizes drugs. It's a police action. It's not a war action. You don't fight a war this way. We use this weak metaphor. I was part of this war. When I was a prosecutor, we prosecuted these huge drug cases in New York. We're still fighting that war. That's not a good record. And I learned a lot doing it. And we did put bad people in prison. But the war, quote, war, continues. But it's not a war in the sense conflicts such as World War I and II are a war, or the Korean War. These are wars. So you can't take seriously a government that hopes by doing something quickly, saying it fast, with a great demonstration, and people will be so excited at this glistening material that they'll say, oh wow, look at that. So we have a department that is ailing, and people may be staying there because they want to have a meal on the table and a place to take care of their own families. Okay, so I understand that. Now the second part is we have the Army, Navy, engaged in actions off Venezuela. And on September the 2nd, there was a notice that no one should be left alive. I'm paraphrasing. Today they're telling us, no, there was no such order as that. Well, it exists or it doesn't exist. But we have something that if the nation sees the film, they'll feel as did Jim Himes, who was the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee in the House. He said in his career he'd never seen anything like that. And what he was talking about is 2 seafarers who survived the first blast on the ship, if you can call it that. And that was not tolerable, and they shot again. Are you telling me nobody knew about the shooting? Everybody was, what, looking at the comics or something? Now, why did they shoot a second time when there were two people alive? Well, they had weapons. They had guns. They were at sea. They weren't face to face. They had blown up the damn ship, and these two managed to crawl back onto the wreckage, and because they were alive, they were shot dead. Because they'd be witnesses, they were shot dead. Because they presented no challenge to the entire Navy that was shooting, miles away, hundreds of feet away, in an open ocean, in violation of international law. How it is possible that these people aren't all on suspension, if not fired? How is that possible? And it's possible because we have a corrupt government from top to bottom. And the opposition is sort of like, put your finger in the air and see which way the wind is blowing, to see how little you can get away with saying in a silent protest. Now, Jim Himes came as close to echoing what I think are the sentiments of the people by what we know without having seen the pictures of the killing of these two men on this ship. And he said, well, they're bad men. I don't know if they were bad men. I don't know if there were drugs on the boat. Why would you destroy a boat that has the evidence that you claim exists? In my career as a prosecutor, when I prosecuted what they called junk cases, often people wanted to put it all out on tables and show the weapons and the drugs, both to prejudice the jury, in my opinion, and to show that we were making a difference, that we were prosecuting the law, that we were keeping people safe in New York, where cocaine and heroin and things like that were circulating willingly, with great appetite by Americans for these drugs. So, where are we now? If we, and I haven't seen yet, because it's too early, I haven't seen how this is covered. But if these two stories aren't covered the way I said, we've lost our way. We've lost our ability to think. We are complying with Big Brother, if you will. Although Big Brother didn't have the technology to be as damaging and as historic and as punishing as what's going on in America right now. So, those are a few of my thoughts today. In an ordinary society, release the dogs of war. In an ordinary society, heads would roll by now. People at least would be suspended. They should be arrested. Information should have been sealed and protected. In connection with our Secretary of Defense, who prefers to think of it as war, who knows little about the subject, and certainly nothing of the judgment of a general that's required in these modern times. He apparently concealed evidence that was on his phone in connection with the other scandal, in which an Atlanta editor was on the phone while they were talking about strikes into Yemen. And so we know these guys cheat and lie and conceal. So we had two events today. One is to ballyhoo a prosecution that's little more, well, than a violation. I wonder if the bomb could work. I'm not, for 5 years they mess around with that, and then one day with this worthless president, they eliminate all the prosecutions of the 1,000 who were arrested and prosecuted. So, and then the second story is in a way even, well, as or more dangerous. One is a domestic scandal. This is an international scandal, that we would go and kill seafarers. Why? Because they could be witnesses? Because they might have guns? We blew up their whole ship. What are you talking about? They're afraid. What would they do? Eat the drugs in the boat they'd destroy that already couldn't be recovered? So we have common sense. We have common decency. But these people are uncommonly vicious and evil, and we have to stop this excursion into violence, lying, bad government, because it will bring us all down if we don't stop it. And so that's what I got to say from my cathedral of trees. All the best. Bye-bye.